Welcome to Journix Explains. In this episode, we're going to take a look at how much your kid should save for retirement. My name is Tom Young, and in this episode, we're going to explore how much a fresh college graduate should be saving for retirement. Imagine this scenario. Your kid has just graduated from college and he or she is on her first job. They come up to you and ask, "Mom, Dad, how much should I save for retirement?" As a financial advisor, I've seen the entire gamut of answers here. I've seen from people saying, "I don't know," to, "Well, as much as you can, honey." And neither of these answers are that useful to your kid. The problem is we don't actually want to give them bad advice. We don't actually know where they're going to be in life. Do they want children? What age will they retire? What kind of lifestyle will they live? All these things we don't know and they won't know for many years to come. But we have to start somewhere when it comes to saving for retirement. It's not great for us just to say, well, let's just leave it what it is and we'll see eventually what's going to happen. What we actually have to do is start preparing today. So today we're going to take a look at how much a college graduate should save for retirement. In this episode, we're going to take a look at a real-life example, Claire, who is 23, just graduated from college and is starting to save for retirement. Some of her details are listed here. She earns $50,000, has a 6% 401k match. By the end of the episode, we're going to take a look. For her to save $1 million at retirement, and that's in today's dollars, does she need to save A, 6%, B, 10%, or C, 20% of her salary to achieve that? By the end of the episode, we'll have an answer for you. In this episode, we're going to go over the 5 steps you need to take to talk to your kid about saving for retirement. Step 1. Get them in the right mindset. It's really important to get people in the right mindset before talking about money. And that's because in American culture, and most cultures in the world, talking about money is awkward. In fact, it comes up as the top 3 things that families don't like discussing. And there is good reason for that. According to the American Psychological Association, money and work are the 2 biggest stressors in people's lives. And when you look at Generation Z adults, 81% name money as a significant stressor in their lives. That is an incredible number of people. And if you think about that for a second, that's the reason why talking about money can be so awkward. This is actually the reason as well why discussing retirement can be so difficult. The way that most people avoid anxiety is to not talk about it at all. So when you start talking to your kids about money, it's important that they are in the right mindset. You and them both. Make sure that they understand that you're just trying to help. You're there as a sounding board, as an advisor. You're not there to judge, but you're there to provide advice as much as you can. They also need to know that you're not going to be there forever to help support them. That they're going to need to eventually, or already, be independent, be by themselves, and start planning a future for their own. You might want to help support them for longer, maybe through an inheritance. But it's healthy for them to learn to live independently. You should also let them know how important it is for them to save. According to the US government, 53% of Americans are not on track to having enough money saved by retirement. And again, that is a huge number of people. So make sure you get them in the right mindset. To get people in the right mindset, one trick I really like to use is just a simple breathing technique. It sounds a little silly, but simply breathing in and breathing out, just a couple times like that, calms people down. You should recognize that the proper mindset for thinking about retirement is one of being calm, calculated, and just knowing where you want to go. There's a lot of emotions that can be involved when you think about money. But when you're thinking of retirement, it's simply planning. You don't have to be stressed. You don't have to be worried because these are the things that are within your control today. You are in control of how much money you save. That bank account is going to grow if you put money in it. Life might be uncertain, but we need to put that away for just a moment when we're thinking about retirement, because thinking about all these different things, all the different things that could happen in life is distracting. We need to come up with a solid number of how much we really should be saving for retirement. And if that doesn't work, then move on to step 2. Saving for retirement actually doesn't have to be stressful because it is easy thanks to the power of compound interest. When you talk to your kid about saving for retirement, it is important that they immediately understand that it is easy thanks to the power of compound interest. If people have the conception that saving money is hard, they will immediately shut off. The conversation will go absolutely nowhere. But the thing though, is that everyone knows that compound interest is important, they just don't know how important it is. $1 saved today will just continue to accumulate all the way until retirement. People know it's important to start saving early. But for most people, we just don't quite know how. The human brain isn't really wired to think about compound interest. When I think about compound interest, I use 2 simple rules to help me figure out how much it's worth. For somebody in their 20s, $1 today will turn into about $7 in retirement, and that's in real dollars, that's in today's dollars. And by today's dollars, I mean purchasing price today. If you take a look back at the 1920s, a candy bar might have been 5 cents, whereas today it might be $1, and in the future it might be worth $5. So when I say $1 turning into $7, I mean $7 in today's purchasing power. That is incredible. When you start adding employer 401k matching, that $7 can double to $14. So imagine that. $1 saved today can turn into $14 at retirement. Now, if you or your kid are a little bit more visual, think about it this way. Imagine having 1 cheesecake today, or at retirement having 14 cheesecakes. Think about that for a second. 14 cheesecakes sitting out on a table for you. That thought is one of plenty, where you can have cheesecake, your friends can have some, and there's going to be plenty left over for yourself later on. And that's the power of compound interest. If you save enough today, you're going to have plenty by the time you retire. The second rule of thumb that you can keep in mind is that $1 saved today will double in value, in real value, every 14 years. So even if you're not that young, even if you're in your 50s, anything that you save then will still double in value by the time you retire. So compound interest can help a lot even for people who are not in their 20s anymore. So some people here might protest. They might say that there's no way to actually guarantee that you're going to get that 5% return per year that you're expecting. And that's true. That's absolutely true. Stock market returns vary greatly, and there's simply no way to control what the stock market will do in the future. But again, we have to start somewhere, and by using some conservative assumptions, in my case using a 5% real rate of return, gives us a nice base of where to start. Because remember, we can always course correct as time goes on. If it turns out that returns are much higher than expected and we can save less money, that's an option for us in the future, and vice versa. Step 3. Make sure they understand their financial situation. So I want you to imagine this for a second. Imagine you're going to a doctor's office for a checkup, and you go ahead and you sit on the examination chair, and the doctor takes one look at you and says, okay, we're going to prescribe you this medication. You would think that doctor's insane. And you would be absolutely right. But that's exactly what a lot of well-meaning family members tend to do. They might go into a situation where they don't understand a person's full financials and try to make suggestions. So make sure you and they understand their financial situations first before trying to prescribe any medication. When you're talking to your kid about money, one of the biggest mistakes that you can make is assuming that you understand their financial situation completely. Oftentimes, they don't understand their own financial situation either. So in this step, I would recommend them list out the 4 major things: the assets, liabilities, income, and expense. 4 things. Because the thing is, everyone, and I mean everyone, college graduates all the way up to senior executives, tend to underestimate all of it. They will underestimate how much they're making, they'll underestimate how much they're spending. So for example, for assets, a lot of people forget about their 401ks, that they actually have more money saved away than they think they do. The same thing is true for liabilities. People will tend to underestimate them. This is especially true for college graduates who have student debt. A lot of student debt can accumulate interest while they're in school, and this catches a lot of people by surprise. The same thing is true for income, and the same thing is true for expenses. Most people don't realize how much they're spending on things. The same thing is true for people who are older as well. Imagine you have a 30-year mortgage and you're 15 years through paying it. How much of that mortgage do you think you've actually paid off? It turns out it's only 1/3, and that's because of the way that interest works. Again, it's the same thing for income. People will underestimate how much they make because of all the withholdings that their employer might make. And as far as expenses, people tend to underestimate this as well. This is especially true with taxes because a lot of people just don't think about city taxes and state taxes as well as their federal amounts. It's also extremely easy to underestimate how much money you spend on a day-to-day basis. A lot of things that seem like one-time purchases end up having to repeat over and over again every year. Step 4. Create a goal. As I said earlier in this video, life is uncertain. We don't know where your kid is going to be in 5, 10, 15 years, let alone by the time they retire. But it's still important to create a goal to understand where you're going. One of my favorite quotes about this actually comes from Alice in Wonderland. The Cheshire Cat tells Alice that if she doesn't know where she wants to go, it doesn't really matter which direction she's walking. For retirement planning, this is also the case. When you're coming up with a goal, there are 3 things that you should keep in mind. The first thing is that the goal must be realistic. You have to recognize that some people will earn more in life than others, but the goal itself must be tailored to the person, must be tailored to your kid. The second thing to keep in mind is the $1 million recommendation. Now, What do I mean by this? Most financial advisors will recommend people have at least $1 million in savings in today's money by the time they retire. The reason why financial advisors say $1 million is because it allows a 4% drawdown. That means you can withdraw 4% of the $1 million every year without really worrying about running out of money. There are a lot of really bad rules of thumb out there, but this one is actually a good one. Having $1 million saved by retirement actually puts you on pretty good track. And keep in mind, this is per person, not for family. The third thing you should keep in mind is that while the $1 million is a target, you should really be looking at having at least $2 million by the time you retire. And that is because of healthcare costs. According to a number of studies, healthcare costs are projected to rise at 3% per year for the foreseeable future. Inflation, on the other hand, is about 2.1%. So healthcare costs are just going to grow and grow over time. The reason why I think having $2 million saved at retirement is that it gives you the cushion in case healthcare costs keep on going up. The second reason I recommend your kid target $2 million in today's money by the time they retire is because of special cases. If your kid ends up with something long-term like Alzheimer's, healthcare costs will skyrocket. Obviously, the average person will not get Alzheimer's, but you have to prepare for the worst. Because it's like the story of the 6-foot man who drowned crossing a river that was 5 feet deep on average. The third reason I recommend you telling your kid to save at least $2 million by retirement is because they can always change their mind and save less later. Because when it comes down to it, with savings, it's way easier to save less than to save more. And so if it turns out you have far too much savings, you can always cut back. It's a lot more difficult to go the other way, where you realize that you need to do a lot of catch-up and you not need to start saving a lot. We'll cover in later videos too. There are tricks that people in their 50s can use. The government actually gives people who are over 50 a whole range of ways to catch up for retirement, but that's for a later episode. And again, one thing to remember through this entire process is that it is easy to save this amount of money, especially if you're starting early. So don't freak out. $1 million or $2 million might seem like a lot to them, but it's actually quite attainable over the long term. Now that you have a goal thought out, step 5, calculate how to reach that goal. See what kind of resources are available to them. Does their employer offer some kind of 401k matching, or do they have to just save through IRAs? In Claire's case that we saw before, her employer actually offers 1-for-1 matching all the way up to 6% of her salary. And this is actually a very, very common form of retirement savings. And for those without 401k plans with their employer, generally their employer will offer some kind of retirement plan, maybe some kind of defined benefit plan or something else. Once you know what resources your kid has at their disposal, you can start calculating how much they should be saving of their income to reach their goal. Now that you have the information you need to calculate how much your kid needs to save for retirement, it's time to do the work. Now, when you're looking to help your kid figure out how much to save for retirement, there are 3 different tools that you can use. The first one is do it yourself. You can open up an Excel spreadsheet or even just use a financial calculator. Figure out year by year, if you saved a certain percentage, how much does it add up? Remember, you're using simple assumptions here. I would personally use a 5% rate of return and maybe assume a 1% growth in income per year. The second option you have is to use a robo-advisor. Now, these are online services that you can input in the information and they'll just spit out an answer afterwards. For the majority of fresh college graduates, I recommend them use a robo-advisor. Their finances tend to be a lot simpler. They don't yet have a mortgage, and most of them don't have kids yet. So financial planning for them tends to be very easy. And robo-advisors are a great option for people like that. And so if you feel comfortable using it, I would definitely recommend that route. The third option is for you to use your current financial advisor and ask them to just do the simple calculation for you. Most advisors are going to have access to some pretty complex software, and so they'll be able to do things like Monte Carlo simulations and other complex tasks. Now back to Claire, the example that we had at the very beginning of this episode. Remember, there were 3 choices for her, whether she would save 6%, 10%, or 20% of her income to reach $1 million by the time she retires. Now that you have a sense of the power of compound interest, it shouldn't surprise you that much. The answer is actually A, 6%. She only has to save 6% to reach her retirement goal of $1 million by the time she retires. And reaching $2 million for her is actually not difficult either. If she's maxing out her IRA every year, and that just really means an extra $500 or so per month, she will actually have about $2.1 million by the time she retires. And so doing these 2 simple things actually puts her on a very good track already for retirement. So in conclusion, it's just extremely important that you talk to your kid about saving for retirement. The earlier they start saving, the easier it is for them to have a good retirement later on. It is cultural in most of the world to not want to talk about money. It's something that people just hide away and don't think about, and that's to people's detriment. If you can talk to your kid about money to show them that it is something they can be comfortable about, that it is something that they should think about, and it's something that they can talk to you about, you've given them just such a huge leg up in life. The other important lesson that you can give to them is that it is easy, because if you take a step back for just a second and you realize what we've just said here is by saving 6% of your income, you get to have $1 million by the time you retire. That is an incredibly easy thing that you can do. So I wish you great luck in talking to your kids about retirement. This is Tom Young for Jarnix Explains. I'll talk to you next time.